Hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Cuts of Soups with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to have a two-part conversation with our good friend Rocco Miller. He does such a great job over at Bracketeer.org. I know that he's helping out these teams in terms of setting up their schedules right now, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We've got a lot of big NBA draft decisions that are looming. We're going to be talking about that. Teams are still looking to fill out their rosters, so we'll be diving in on that topic as well. We're going to just talk a little bit of everything with Rocco Miller. Towards the back half, we'll talk about some of the low to mid majors that have really spent this offseason and teams that you might want to be alert of right now so that way they're not sneaking up on you come the start of the season. So we've got a good time coming up there. And then in the final segment, I'm going to recap the news and notes we saw in college basketball on Wednesday. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters the mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're about firing whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I very much do beggeth you and pleadeth you to send in these Twitter / X questions. It helps the offseason go by a little bit faster and lets me know what you guys are looking to hear on this podcast. So please do send those in, and we're going to keep great chats going with so many great guests throughout the offseason as well. One of those men, it is Rocco Miller. We're just going to have a two-part conversation here since we didn't have any big headline move that happened in college basketball on Wednesday, so we'll jump right into it with Rocco. He's doing such an amazing job over at his website, Bracketeer.org, but on top of that, he's doing amazing work over at Basket Under Review, Field of 68. Heck, he does a little bit of college baseball work this time of year as well, so he's truly a man that does a little bit of everything. He does so all so well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter / X at Rocco Miller, his first and last name, the number 8 all together, and I know that he's advising a lot of these teams on their schedules. He's in touch with a lot of head coaches, so it's really great to be able to get that insight. It's really great to be able to have his just wealth of knowledge on this podcast, and Rocco, I always appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for bearing with me. It was clearly a busy day in scheduling to the point where I mismanaged our original time, so I appreciate you bearing with me, and always great to be back on with you. How have you been?
Well, the grind never stops, my friends, so I always appreciate any time that you're able to make, and I'm doing great, and I'm doing much better because I don't have big decisions unlike a lot of these schools that they're holding out hope that their guys are going to be coming back. We've got a lot of big ones this year, even though we have the fewest amount of underclassmen that declared for the NBA draft since 2003. How do you take a look at this year's NBA draft decisions? Because I think that Milan Mimicevic probably has the biggest one because he's also in the transfer portal along with being in the NBA draft. While guys like Tyler Tanner, if he does return to college, he's just going to be going back to Vanderbilt. So I think that's really interesting to look at a lot of these guys throwing their Allen Graves, who might be going to LSU as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you just nailed 3 of the biggest ones. Maybe Koa Pete would be on that list if he decides to go back to Arizona, and obviously a few others as well. If you're looking at some international type prospects or guys kind of not as big a names yet in college basketball. But I think, on the inside of those programs, whether it's Arizona, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, LSU, I think they have a better idea than we do about where these guys are leaning. I think maybe only 1 or 2 guys a year are true 50-50, especially by the time we get to this point in the process, and especially leading up to deadline withdrawal day, and that's coming soon, I believe. So the teams themselves, I think, are fine. They've got contingency plans. The guy comes back, then obviously they know that roles will be reduced for some of those players on the roster, hoping for bigger roles, and vice versa. If they don't get their star back, then they move forward with, leaning on the next guy, or maybe it frees up some budget to go find somebody else. I think at the end of the day, it'll all work itself out on either side of those decisions. But certainly for the common college basketball community and fan member, they're pins and needles trying to hope they at least get a proven star back in their lineups.
Yep, absolutely. There are some big decisions, and with Koa Pete, I do think that he's going to stay in the NBA draft, but boy, if he comes back to Arizona, that's a team that's going to be so dangerous, and I think that could be one of the biggest ones out there, because with Arizona, we know that they're going to be a top 10 team coming into the season. Even if Koa Pete doesn't return, they've done enough with bringing back Montevis Krivas, the guys that they've signed here in the transfer portal, that they're going to be fine. I feel like that would be the ultimate cherry on top, and I don't know if I could quite put them with Florida in terms of that number 1 sort of look, Duke as well, but I think that they'd be right there in that top 4, top 3.
Yeah, definitely, especially with the way they can leverage their size and build off all the success of this year. And I think playing through Krivas more is not such a bad thing based on, what we saw in flashes for parts of their big games last year, whether it was the big Houston win on the road or some of those big games in the tournament, like the Purdue second half game that I was at. So, Arizona's freshman class is star-studded as well. So they're going to be in good hands across the roster, regardless of Koa's decision now. But if Koa were somehow to come back, that would be unbelievable. The guy bulldozed the majority of the opponents they played, and I think he's just coming back even stronger and more confident. He does need to work on his jump shot. I think I saw at the NBA combine that he had struggled a bit in his outside shooting. I think at the next level in the pros, they will want him to be more consistent as a shooting threat from the outside. But otherwise, here in college basketball, like if anyway he's back, he's just bulldozing again, and Tommy Lloyd's going to love that.
Oh, absolutely. As we do have a guy that always does a great job for us, Rocco Miller over at Bracketeer.org, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly that's going to be an impactful one. And I think that in terms of the difference of where his team will not be without him, this could be the biggest one, because we know that Arizona, regardless of if they get back Koa Pete or not, they're going to be just fine. And Vanderbilt, I don't think it's like missing the tournament or anything like that without Tyler Tanner, but I look at what they've done here in the offseason. They haven't added perhaps as much shooting as I would anticipate. He didn't necessarily measure out the world's greatest at the combine. We'll see what he does in more of the drills, what have you, but I feel like that's a big one for Vanderbilt, because getting back a guy like him, I think is massive, especially with what Tennessee has done here in the offseason, because I just don't think that they measure up to those top teams without Tyler Tanner.
Tyler Tanner, to me, was the most important player to his team in the Southeastern Conference, Greg. I think you can look at a lot of great players across the league. Obviously, teams like Florida finished higher than Vanderbilt. But, let's not forget, Vanderbilt was inches away, literally, from being in the Sweet 16. And then who knows how they would have done it.
Might be less than inches.
Exactly, less than inches based on that final shot. But also, just the way that final couple minutes played out, Vanderbilt easily could have been the team that advanced. And then who knows, they would have played Iowa in the Sweet 16, and then that could have been an Elite Eight, and sky's the limit, right? So, Tyler Tanner was the engine that made all of it work for the Commodores. I think just being able to play through him and having such a steady hand, his assist to turnover, his points to turnover ratios were outstanding nationally, not just in the SEC. Other teams like Tennessee, it took like an imposing front line with talented guy like Ament to supplement that, but it wasn't like there could be nights where Ament didn't do much and Tennessee would be fine. Vanderbilt definitely leaned on Tyler Tanner in so many ways, and he's an actually really good defender too on the individual level and team defense guy. So I think he's about as important as they come for any individual team success that you'll see in this process and anywhere in college basketball last season. It means a lot. Vanderbilt had great resources and great investments since Byington got the job. So I think they'll continue on their rise next year with or without him. But with him, they're a bona fide Final Four contender. There's no question.
Yep, I think without question that is going to be massive for them, and that's one that I'm keeping my eye on as well. And certainly, as the NBA draft decisions are being made, we are seeing a little bit of a slowdown in the transfer portal, which that's just going to naturally happen here in the middle of May. But how do you take a look at things right now? Because I think that once those decisions are made, for lack of a better term, we might have a second wave with regards to transfer portal. Obviously, the 5-and-5 rule might be causing for that as well. But I feel like this next week or two, in terms of actual player movement, it might be a little bit slow, but I think towards the end of May, it might be heating up once again going into June when you start to get those summer workouts, and you probably don't want guys missing summer workouts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon right now because there's teams with quite a few roster spots. The last couple times I've been on with you, we've highlighted LSU at the highest level. They
finally have a starting five.
Exactly. And San Francisco here at the closer to the mid-major level, still with tons of roster spots. I was digging into leagues like the A10, the American, the Mountain West. There's still a handful of teams that need more than 3 players there. And you just wonder, like with the 5-and-5 fallout, if that's going to benefit some of those teams or not. And then you also are seeing, trickle in commitments from the international scene. Interestingly enough, the University of Washington brought in the Brazilian big man that we'll see how he does. Obviously St. Mary's was able to bring in a McDonald's All-American for the first time in school history. That's a huge deal. There's the high school route that there's still some intriguing prospects available. And don't forget, Greg, there's the ability to, depending on the academic side of things, the class of 2027 high school kids, if their bodies and their academics are ready to transition to college, they could flip them still this summer into next year's roster. So we saw that with Bruce Branch the third earlier in the process at BYU, who I do believe is going to be a star player and potential all Big 12 player, might be the best player in the entire class, has already made that decision. Those are the three buckets right now. You got international, you got some high school potential leftovers, and then obviously the 5-5 situation.
Yep, absolutely. And obviously Louisville was able to flip one of their 2027 commits to 2026 as well, as they just feel like have a little bit of everything. They've got someone coming in from the G League. They've got all the transfers. So, I mean, it really is becoming the Noah's Ark of a college basketball team there, as Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rocco does an amazing job with scheduling. I know that he's helping out these teams in terms of getting themselves set for the upcoming season, deciding what tournaments they're going to be taking. And I know that with our chat with Rocco, he's also going to be talking about some of these teams that are going to be going beyond the tournament to be able to set up more great matchups for this upcoming season. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about some teams that are under the radar that have really spent some of these mid-major teams that you might want to be taking note of here in the offseason because they might be in for a big year. We'll talk about that with Rocco on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by this man, Rocco Miller. He's doing such great work over at his website, Bracketeer.org. He's helping these teams get all set up with regards to their schedules. He's helping out over at the Field of 68 Basket Under Review and so much more. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Rocco Miller, the number 8 altogether. And just mentioned it, you are helping out a lot of these teams with their schedules right now. As this is going on, it makes some very difficult decisions for these teams in terms of what MTEs they want to take part in, because obviously you want to try to get in as many wins as possible. You want to try to get in as much good games in terms of just competitive scheduling as possible as well. And what is sort of that fine line that these teams are balancing? Because obviously they have to fill out the rosters. They have to try to get themselves the best schedule humanly possible to try to get themselves in the NCAA tournament. And it feels like these programs on so many different levels are just, for lack of a better term, towing a fine line.
Right. Well, the MTE part of it is sort of been simplified at the high level, but then there's so many more dynamic parts at the next levels below that. I'll explain that. So at the highest level, Power Fives just want to play Power Five. It's not a very well kept secret, and it's really difficult to get some of these teams to play even like a Dayton or a VCU or a Murray State, teams that have good resources. You might have saw it like High Point in St. Louis agreed to a home and home. Those are logical because both those teams are obviously spending considerable amounts of money. So if they're not going to get Power Fives to play them, they're going to do the next best thing and play each other. We will have St. Louis coming to St. Mary's this year. That's a no-brainer as well. Things of that nature. But I think once you get past the Players Era Festival, the Battle for Atlantis, the ESPN events, the Maui Invitational, your next set of events are starting to get really interesting to me, because outside of the old MTE rules, those are gone now. It's just get 32 games however you can and however you need to. So I'm now helping out with events going on all the way from opening day until Christmas time. And almost every weekend, we have something to offer teams that are more in the middle of the sport, basically from that Atlantic 10, WCC level on down to where, you might see more of those teams matchups on any given weekend at a festival. They don't have to come and play multiple games. They can come and play one. They can come and play three. They can play two. And so I'm seeing so many cool creative ideas, and I'm also kind of preaching that when I'm on the conversations each day. Part of why I was delayed with you, I had multiple head coaches finally get back to me today, so I had to make sure we got the information to them. And I think at the end of the scheduling process, when everybody gets a chance to see what I'm seeing built right now, I think it's kind of cool that you'll be able to see the St. Louis level, the High Point level, still play a ton of good games against teams of that caliber. And if one or two of those teams go 7-1 in those games, 8-0, 6-2, that's going to add up to be quite a bit for a resume, especially with an expanded 76-team NCAA tournament. On the next set of teams down, maybe like your SoCon level, your Summit League level, there's more and more opportunities for them to even go get paid at some of these weekend events. I just announced on Twitter, there's a really good Dallas event coming to Christmas time, which will feature Colorado State, Utah State, Nevada, San Francisco, Tulsa, Florida Atlantic, George Washington, and Loyola Chicago. Makes sense that all those teams were going to go and play another event and 2 extra games against each other. On top of those Thanksgiving events, they're all going to be part of. A lot of those teams are going to Palm Springs. All 8 of those teams are going somewhere else. So you'll see more and more of that as the news comes out. And I'm excited because now you're basically going to get multiple MTE seasons. You're going to have sprinkles of like MTE feelings on each weekend. It's going to also help these teams get all those games in and get up to the 32 limit.
Yep, I do think that it's great that these teams are going to be playing one another. We're going to be seeing good competitive games, and getting more games around Christmas time is great because with the Diamond Head Classic no longer being played on Christmas, that's maybe very, very sad. So hopefully we can get that void filled sooner rather than later. And Rocco, a little bit more of an open-ended question because we've got a lot of teams that are making a bunch of moves, but over the last few weeks, has there been a team or two that has really been catching your attention that maybe we're not talking about that you really think they're putting together a nice offseason and you think that they might be slept upon coming into the year?
Little Rock and Lamar.
Yes.
How about that?
I love it.
Yes, and I'm not going to get into specific player names, but I can tell you what, there's been a big increase in money at both of those places. And we've talked about Tennessee Tech, so I feel like Tennessee Tech, the cheat code for the Greg Peterson podcast, because they're the answer to every one of your questions. But I'll go back to Little Rock and Lamar. Little Rock, of course, hired Travis Ford, and there's been a massive investment to not only Little Rock basketball, but Little Rock joining the United Conference. They're basically the one team from not the ASUN or the WAC that's joining. So they're the wild card, and they're not joining just to join. They're joining with a whole new purpose, much like Tennessee Tech leaving the OVC. Little Rock left the OVC, and they're doing it for results. They're spending money at those levels. In fact, I think Little Rock, they should be in the top 3 of the United Conference in spending. And, I probably only put them below Tarleton right now. I don't know exactly what Tarleton's spending, but I know they opened the new arena. I know Eric Howell's a coach, and that was a great hire by Tarleton. So add them to your list. And then I think when you look at Lamar, they hired Jordan Fee, who is just like an amazing up-and-coming coach the last handful of cycles, finally takes the Lamar Cardinals job. But why did he take the job, Greg? Where's that Brian Windhorst gif when we need it with the fingers going up in the air? Yeah, it's because they're invested as well. So now, not only are we going to get great games with Stephen F. Austin and McNeese like we did last year, you've got Lamar entering the party. UTRGV stepped up last year. Now, I don't think they're spending nearly what Lamar is, but I think RGV, by getting Brandon Chambers, that was a strategic move. Of course, if you don't know the Brandon Chambers story, he followed Will Wade from McNeese. He was part of those original McNeese teams to NC State last year. He's very well connected in the region. I do expect UTRGV to continue to fight. And I also know coaches like Jim Shaw at Texas A&M Corpus Christi and a couple others like New Orleans, they're ready to take it on as well. But I actually now strongly think we have a big 3 with Lamar, SFA, and McNeese because the talent acquisition is just at a different level with those 3. And I'm excited because I feel like every year we talk about the Southland, it just improves. Let's not forget Incarnate Word still spending pretty good money. And Houston Christian, I think, just got some money as well.
Yep, Southeast Louisiana has had themselves a haul over the last 2 weeks. So to add them to as well.
Yes, exactly. I was going to mention them as well. So we have a fun Southland, Greg.
Yeah, when you got Lamar bringing in Quante Berry from Memphis, Matt Reed from Iona, Nicolo Moretti, who should have gotten more run over at Florida Atlantic. You're speaking my language.
Those players are amazing.
Yep.
Those players are amazing.
Yep, and for Little Rock, EJ Okamanu, who was over at Hawaii last year. I'm going to say the same incorrectly. Jalakul King, who was over at UMBC, part of the NCAA tournament team of UMBC. Jemai Felt. These two teams, they are locked and loaded. You're seeing some spending out there in the Big South, the Southland, and fortunately, we don't have to do $100 billion of spending to be able to get you aboard, Rocco, but if I could, I would, because you are putting in so much work, taking a look at this great game of college basketball, helping these schedules get all set, these MTE events. You're very hard at work in this month of May. Some might sleep in May. You certainly do not. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
That's right, Greg. We're actually in the middle right now of printing shirts that say we don't sleep in May. That way at the Final Four next year, we're just going to walk around town wearing shirts that say we don't sleep in May. See what everybody's reaction is like. I think that'd be some good live vlogging, if you will. But yeah, I appreciate it. Bracketeer.org is the mothership. We have a lot of scheduling information already loaded in there. And the public can't see that quite yet, but don't worry. We'll start off with the Big Ten here as soon as possible, ideally by the end of May. I know I said before it'd probably be available by now, but just so many pieces of information that are sensitive. And as soon as we can make it public, that will happen. We appreciate everybody's support with the site. I mean, there's multiple people helping with the scheduling process behind the scenes that are actually different people that do the reporting during the season that we had great support with as well. And I'm thankful for everybody that's bought into the vision and all the schools and teams that trust us with the information and also advising them on which games to take and which games not to take. I know it's more stressful for them than it is for us. We just try to keep everything fun and strategic. So Bracketeer.org is the mothership. Over on Basket Under Review, Greg, I have an interview that I just recorded and it'll be up probably in the next 48 hours with Big Sky Commissioner Tom Wistrcill. What a great human being he is. I've had a good relationship with Tom for the last several years. He's on the NCAA selection committee, been a great resource for me as I do my bracket forecasting throughout the year. Also just understanding the committee dynamics and all of that. Tom has always been a close ally. And we had a great 45-minute one-on-one. Check that out at Basket Under Review. Should be available by the end of this week. Last but not least, Field of 68. Obviously, we're working actually on some events. You'll see almost a full 24 hours this year of a old school hoops marathon, Greg. So really excited about that. You've seen some of the matchups already. I know Liberty playing High Point was announced early on. I'll give you a cookie here, Greg. And don't post this online right away, but we're going to see UAB play McNeese in that event. I'm excited for that one. I think, the goal is to play the full 24 hours. I think they'll fall a few hours short, but man, there's going to be games starting at 6 a.m. So buckle up for Monday, November 2nd. And then of course, prior to that, we'll have tons of preseason shows and coverage, starting with the mid-major show, eventually getting into some bracketology. And honestly, Greg, you know how fast this stuff goes. Before we know it, it's going to be Selection Sunday again. So let's just enjoy every day that we have until then.
Absolutely. And you know me, I love my random college basketball games in Hawaii. Give me some sort of a 4 a.m. game. I remember Stephen F. Austin in Northern Iowa back a decade and a half ago when they did that.
Yeah.
Those were games that were always so much fun. So I am very jazzed up about that. Give me the 4 a.m. hoops. Give me the 4 p.m. hoops. Give me the midnight hoops. Give me all of it. Give me Christmas hoops once again. We unfortunately didn't get that last year, and Rocco is one of the men trying to make this happen. And that's why we love him so much on this podcast. Big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Up next, I get you guys a recap of the news and notes we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to be joined by Rocco Miller, who does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. He is doing an incredible job of advising these teams on how to set up their schedules. He does an incredible job over at the Field of 68. His website, Bracketeer.org, Basket Under Review, and so much more. And he just adds so much great insight to this podcast. So a big thanks to our guy, Rocco, for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Jack Graham has decided that he is heading on over to Marist. This will give them a nice little bit of a shot in the arm in terms of their offense. Last year over at New Hampshire, was able to supply that team with 11 points per game. Not an amazing three-point shooter. I had about 32% from three, but I do think that he's going to be be a relatively good fit for a Mariners team that, as we all know, they're a little bit more of a defense-oriented team. They do a great job in terms of being able to hold things down low. He, in my opinion, has the versatility to be able to guard multiple positions as well. It's part of a New Hampshire team that just wasn't that great, to say the least. And for Mariners, they really haven't added a lot of D1 guys. They've been looking a little bit more to the non-Division I route. So adding a guy that has averaged 11 points per game in the past is big. They have some good roster retention as well. So really do like this move for Maris, and this is a really good ad, in my opinion, for Portland State. You've got Corin Johnson coming in. For Corin Johnson, he's dealt with injuries throughout his career. He was over at Ole Miss this last season, was unable to get out there on the floor for them, but he has played for Washington and Louisville throughout his career. When he was over at Louisville, again, didn't see a lot of playing time, but last he was out there on the West Coast over at Washington during the 2023-24 season. He was averaging for Washington about 11 points per game, shot 37.5% from three, 1.2 assists, darn near 3 assists per game. This is the sort of guy that Portland State can really elevate from, and for Portland State, they're out there in a big sky, in which I think that it's going to be a very, very open sort of landscape for them. They've also got Luke Kearney coming over from Utah State, nice 6'7" forward that should be able to help out the team. Emil Sikas, he comes over from North Dakota State at 6'5". He's able to bomb it from three, and Portland State has always been a really good team on the glass. They typically are just lacking a little bit in terms of backcourt. They have a tough time with guards or turnovers. He should be able to help out with that so greatly. I love this move for Portland State. I think that they are forming themselves as one of the more underrated, shall we say, West Coast mid-majors out there, because you've got so much movement with regards to like the Pac-12 and Mountain West teams, the Big West, what have you. So having Portland State get this sort of an ad, I think that this is absolutely massive for them, and love where they're going with this one. I like this move for Arkansas Pine Bluff. CJ Smith, he was over at UTEP. He's joining them for Arkansas Pine Bluff. They had a better year last year. They were able to build themselves up with the fact that they were able to have a few star players on the roster. Obviously, they didn't have a lot of depth, and they lose a lot of that from this past season. But for Arkansas Pine Bluff, they haven't necessarily had a lot of ads here in the offseason. They typically go a little bit more of the non-Division I route, but I do think that this is a good one for them to really get the ball rolling. And for CJ Smith, he was originally a recruit of Oklahoma State, just has dealt with injuries over the last 2 seasons. Last year over at UTEP, he was limited to only 11 games, so that was a little bit unfortunate for them. For Pine Bluff, this is a group that has been very much built around a star player or two, Keon Williams this last season, who he had began his career, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, over at Oklahoma State as well. He was really able to elevate the team. Smith was a part of a very defense-oriented UTEP team that generates a lot of turnovers. Pine Bluff has always been a team that's been rough with regards to their defense. They were trying to generate more turnovers last season, so getting this sort of an ad, I think, is really massive for them. I think that this one is also pretty solid, as you've got Kalu Anya, who has decided that he's heading on over from St. Louis to Virginia. Now, I don't think that he's going to be a guy that's going to be seeing mono minutes for Virginia. This is a little bit more of a insurance policy, because you've got the Darius Ritter and company, where so there in Anya. He missed the entire 2025-26 season due to injury. Last we saw him, he was a starter over at St. Louis that was very rock solid for St. Louis. 6.5 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game, a steal, a block per contest. Began his career over at Brown. Has never been a guy that's necessarily been an offensive force, but he does a really great job on the defensive side of things. For Virginia under Ryan Odom, they've really been able to build themselves as a tough, tenacious defense. Not as much turnovers with regards to the Virginia defense this past season as when he was over at VCU, but with Odom, I think that he's doing a great job in terms of tapping into his team just being bigger, more physical than the other. They had a really nice year last year, and for Virginia, even though they might not have a great, shall we say, quantity of ads, bringing in Jerion Dixon to help out that backcourt from UC Irvine, Christian Hammond over at Arkansas State. Now you reinforce the front court with Anya. I think that they've made some really nice moves. So love what they're doing here. I love what this program is doing as well. So you've got Tulane bringing in Dame Solani. He was over at Arizona State. Obviously, Arizona State, they can Bobby Hurley in the offseason, and he just wasn't able to really see minutes out there on the floor. He was a guy that redshirted last year at 7'1". He actually comes over from the country of Italy, spent a little bit of time in the great state of Texas, and for Tulane, where this team has really lacked, has been down low over the last few seasons. They typically have some relatively good guard play. They just have absolutely nothing down low, and for Tulane, they've been needing to add depth. They're still a little bit of a ways away from doing that, but they bring in Christian Lewis, double-figure scorer over at Louisiana Monroe. Jordan Dumont should be able to help out in terms of that, shall we say, 6'8" sort of joker player, sort of role. Carson Schwieger, this guy that's able to bomb it bombing from 3 from Queens NC. They bring in TJ Nidu as well. So they're starting to be able to fill out a roster. They lose Bro and Brumba in the offseason, so obviously that's going to be hurting them. But for Tulane, if they can get a few more depth pieces, if this turns out to be something big because Alane is a little bit more of a project player at 7'1", but I mean, if he's able to pan out, Tulane might finally be able to have a little bit of a low post presence. They might not get totally dominated on the glass, so I like this move for them. San Jose State is going the D2 route. They're bringing in a Canadian D2 transfer in Luke Howard. He was over at Simon Fraser last season. Guy shot 41% from 3 at 6'9", 16.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. Obviously, it's been rough going for San Jose State, and when things have been really rocking and rolling under Coach Miles, it's been because the low post play has been really good. The deterioration of low post play, especially last year, has caused the team to go straight down the toilet bowl, and now they've got a guy that can really fill it up because they lose Kobe Garland in the offseason. They still need to add more size. For San Jose State, they really have not added anyone down low other than Zenai Eddie Bedry, who was over at Columbia at 6'9", but he was limited due to injury to fewer than 10 games last season. Like Joey Chimea coming over from Arkansas State, Mookie Cook is a former top 75 recruit of San Francisco, so they've made some solid moves. Would like to see them add a big man, but Luca Howard, who was 6'9" last season, was really able to bomb it from 3. I think that this is a good starting spot for them. You've got Pari Kambamba, who I was mentioning, Marist. They got a nice pickup of bringing in Jack Graham over the past 24 hours. Well, they lose this gentleman who was averaging 4.5 points, 3 rebounds for them, and he has decided that he's heading on over to Radford. For Radford, it was a team that had a relatively good backcourt last season. The front court was not necessarily so amazing, but I feel like Radford has done a good job here in the offseason. Ja'Cory Robinson has some upside coming over from Austin P. Good active hands. Jordan Key really didn't see minutes over at Miami last year, but he's got some upside. We've seen Tristan Gross have some good results over at Mercer and a few other stops as well as a 6'6", a little bit of a combo player. Now you bring in Kambeba, who at 6'6", he shot about 34.5% from 3-point range. They're going to need to be able to bring in a main point guard because they lose Dennis Parker and that backcourt from a season ago. But so I do think they're right for making some solid moves, and the Big South in general have a lot of teams that are spending right now, so you do love to see that. Luis Simona, he was over at Western Kentucky this last season. He was just so limited due to injury. When we saw him 2 seasons ago over at Stonehill, he was a guy that was putting in there 13 points, 4 boards, and this last year, he was just limited, and he was unable to get out there on the floor. And Western Kentucky just dealt with so many injuries this last season, but he's heading out over to Illinois State. Illinois State was one of the oldest teams in college basketball last season, so they lose so much of that veteran experience, but I think that this is going to be a really nice add for them, a guy that is still going to be relatively fresh. They bring in Demarion Birch, who he was over at Bradley doing a nice job for them last season. Zaxton King, he was the king of being able to shoot it well from 3-point range over at Missouri State, is able to run the point. Dang Garang, who was over at Lemoyne at 6'6", he's able to give you a little bit of something, both down low and from the outside, and now you bring in a guy in Simona, who I think is going to be able to fit the system really well. He, at 6'8", is a guy that was shooting about 37.5% from 3-point range over at Stonehill 2 seasons ago. Not a guy that's going to be a dominant force on the glass, but he's good enough to not allow a lot of second and third chances on the defensive glass. Probably going to be an Illinois State team that's going to have a tough time being able to get second and third chances themselves, but overall, I like this move for them. New Hampshire, they lost another man on Wednesday as well, Belial El-Shakiri. He decides that he is going to be heading on over to Oakland, so for New Hampshire, they're losing a lot of these guys due to the transfer portal, but for Oakland, was very slow going for them in the portal. Now they had in there a guy that was averaging about 11.5 points per game. Left something to be desired in terms of their three-point shooting, but Oakland, they always find great three-point shooters at the non-Division I ranks. They've already got a few nice NAIA guys coming in, and they needed to really address the rebounding because they are going to be losing so many of the guys that they had on the roster from a season ago that did such a good job for them down low. Bringing in Chris Fields along with Brady Schwartz is going to be able to really help out with losing Bori Navarula and company, and bringing in El-Shakiri, he was able to give the team 8.2 rebounds per game last season. He was over at Wofford to begin his career, saw a few solid minutes there. Obviously a guy that doesn't shoot it well from 3 at 14% from the outside, but they just need to find some rebounding and some size from the Division I ranks, fill in with the guards from the non-D1 level. They have done a great job in terms of being able to play that blueprint here. F.A. Vaughton, he was over at Oregon this last season, and he's decided that he's going to be heading on over to Stony Brook. For Vaughton, just wasn't able to get out there on the floor. He only played 5 games as a freshman. He's an international man of mystery. He was playing in an under-19 at Turkish league, so Stony Brook taking a little bit of a swing here. And Stony Brook was a very solid low-post defense last year. They were able to do a great job with that regard. The offense, it was just a little bit of, shall we say, tatters. They were able to do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc. They just need to find a little bit more offensively. This is going to be a work in progress, but I like this sort of a swing. that Stony Brook has taken. And you look at what Stony Brook has done here in the offseason, bringing in Jaden Daughtry from Richmond is a good add. Brian Nadanja, he was a 14-plus point per game scorer over at Canisius. And then you've got Morgus Silk, hopefully you got that correct, from West Virginia, guy that at 6'4" is able to handle. So I like what Stony Brook has done. A lot of these guys are a little bit unproven, but I think that a lot of these guys have quite a bit of an upside as well. So I absolutely love that. And Ashton Hardaway, that's Penny's son. He has decided that he's going to Coastal Carolina, and when you're Penny Hardaway and your son decides to go to Coastal Carolina, I don't think that that's necessarily amazing, because it's not even like Ashton Hardaway saw bad minutes last season. He also began his career over at St. Mary's, but he was averaging 5.5 points per game, shot 34.5% from three as a 6'8", little bit of a combo player, and I think that he's going to be able to do a very solid job here over at Coastal Carolina. For Coastal Carolina, they're going to need to improve the fact that they don't generate any turnovers whatsoever. Like, my gosh, no ball pressure whatsoever, but they do a good job in terms of not allowing you clean looks. They were an improved three-point shooting team last season. It does feel like Coastal Carolina is a little bit on the up and up. It's not like they've added like a mondo amount of guys here in the offseason, but they bring in Jalen Cross from Wake Forest as well. Trey Perry, who was a solid player over at Miami of Ohio as well. So Coastal Carolina do a nice job in terms of bulking up that roster. So I like that. And then you got Jaden Teat. He last season was playing over at Sacramento State. He's decided that he's going to Lemoyne. Been a little bit of a silent offseason for Lemoyne. Lemoyne is a team that's still transitioning from the D2 ranks, but I think that this is a great add for them. With Teat, he was averaging about 6 points per game, shot 34.5% from three-point range. I think that he's going to be a good fit with this system. Now for Lemoyne, they're going to need to find that just main facilitator, because last year they were one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of taking care of the ball. I feel like they probably did find that, in my opinion. Damian King, who comes over from UT Martin, he's a guy that's able to pop it and lock it from three as well. They also bring in Khalil Williams, an upside guy from Bryan, Caden Stuckey. I like that he gives his team a little bit of size from VMI as well. And Lemoyne was a solid three-point shooting team last year. Teat is going to be able to elevate that even further, so do like that. And then you got Brandon Weston. He was over at Tennessee State this last season, and he is going to be over at Southern Miss. He was last playing during the 2024-25 season, and he was absolutely amazing that season when he was averaging 16 points, 5 boards, a steal and a half per contest. He was first team All Ohio Valley Conference. Last year, he was just unable to get out there on the floor in general, so this is going to be, in my opinion, a very good gift for them. He was over at Tennessee State last season after being a top 100 recruit, and I mean, man, this is a guy that if he's able to be fully right, he's only career about 32% three-point shooter, but he spent time over at Rhode Island and Seton Hall. This is a really, really good get, in my opinion, for Southern Miss, because they just need a little bit more guard play. They were very good down low last season. The guard play was lackadaisical, and they're still going to need three-point shooting. Southern Miss has not added like any three-point shooting whatsoever, but still, he's a step in the right direction for them. So I love this kid, and if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_81. Keep in mind, Lord CM, the mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to Rocco Miller, who does such an amazing job over at Bracketeer.org, for joining me in the last segment. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Here in the offseason, we're looking at the news and notes of college basketball. Once these rosters get set, we'll get into conference preview mode as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then once we get back into the season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today. I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.